Hey everybody, this is Dave Palumbo, and you're listening to the Marvel Card Collectors Podcast.
Hello everybody, my name is Ian Taylor and welcome to the Marvel Card Collectors Podcast, brought to you by the Marvel Cards Fan Collective, an awesome community of card collectors and creators. You can find our two groups on Facebook, details of which are at the end of this podcast, so come check us out. With me as always is my co-pilot in all things Marvel cards. And I was looking for inspirational family quotes for this intro and found this Robin Williams quote which stood out. There's three things in the world that you need: respect for all kinds of life, a nice bowel movement on a regular basis, and a navy blazer. Nothing to do with family, but I'd argue a fourth thing in there, and that's knowing rad.
Thank you. And I include all three of those things, so it's quite perfect. Yeah,
absolutely. Can I just say, I really miss Robin Williams being in the world.
Yes.
I was thinking about this the other day. I think it was either the anniversary of his passing or the anniversary of his birthday, which is his birthday, I guess, recently. And there was a lot of stuff on Twitter, and it was just like scrolling through joy, just all the quotes.
Yeah, really great stuff. Plus everything he was in too. He was absolutely brilliant at everything. Oh, really was.
He raised the bar. Absolutely everything.
I think my favorite Robin Williams movie has to be What Dreams May Come. Not a lot of people know that film.
I've seen it.
It's a really pretty film. Really pretty film. Yeah.
I saw it it was released over here on Boxing Day. So I went so day after Christmas. Do you call Boxing Day in America?
No, that's your Christmas, right? Or something like that?
It's the 26th of December, so it's the day after Christmas.
It's the day after Christmas, yeah.
So yeah, I remember going to it on Boxing Day, and I went on my own, and I was one of the only people in the cinema. I don't think it had a brilliant commercial release. Anyway,
no, I don't think it did either. No, I don't think it did either.
We're off piste. Good Will Hunting is mine.
Yes, we already did. Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one.
Good Will Hunting. Absolutely astonishing movie. Absolutely astonishing movie.
Yeah, good piece.
I was looking for family quotes because keeping it in the family, do you like my segue here? Is what this week's show is all about. Oh, it's tenuous. I'm absolutely thrilled that our guest has agreed to come and talk to us. Sir, introduce yourself. Who are you?
Hi, guys. I'm Dave Palumbo. It's good to be here.
Hey, for those who don't know, Dave has recently been officially announced as the artist on Marvel Masterpieces 2020. How you must feel about being able to talk about that?
Yeah. I lived with not talking about it for so long that by the time it finally got announced, I was strangely completely unprepared. I kind of almost even forgot that I was getting ready to be able to share this, and so it was just a scramble to I didn't even say anything for a day because I was just responding to other people saying things. And
oh wow. So, oh wow!
Did you prepared over here?
Every single form of electronic communication you've had suddenly blow up.
I mean, it wasn't over the top, but it was enough of just kind of reacting to this, reacting to that, that by the time I was I should probably write something on my social media accounts about this. And it was dinner time, which is usually not a good idea for when you make an announcement of any kind. So it's I'm going to wait until tomorrow, because if I post something, then I'm going to have people responding and I'm going to be asleep. And you know, so.
Yeah. Well, did they give you much notice that they were announcing it? Did you know when it was going to happen? Or
I had so that's the thing. Originally, before, I don't know how much COVID had an effect on anything, because a lot of what happens at Upper Deck is kind of outside of my vision.
Sure.
But I understood that the announcement was going to come earlier in the year. And then when all of this stuff started going on, it started getting kind of like delayed. And then at a certain point, I honestly, like, I had finished the work and I was starting to like get into other things. And I just kind of was like not thinking about it anymore, which is just very much how I am. Whatever I'm working on kind of like takes up my attention. And so then, yeah, I don't remember. I guess it must have been like a few days, maybe as much as a week ahead of time that they touched base because they wanted me to, send them some additional like info for the press release and things like that. So,
Gotcha.
So then I knew like, oh, I guess this is happening soon. And and then it was like the morning of that I found out that it was going to be like coming out that afternoon, I think.
Yeah. We had that as well, didn't we? I woke up in the UK and I was like, this email had come in. It was like, okay, we've got 6 hours to.
Yeah, Ian and I were flying trying to get this all together for the announcement, but
which was great. Yeah. You guys pulled it off very well because it felt very like. It felt like you were a lot more prepared than I was.
Well,
I remember looking at Ian and I was like, man, did we actually like get this right on time over here? Because it was crazy how fast we were moving.
Yeah.
I think it helps that I kind of often do that kind of thing in my work because I work in marketing. So I'm kind of.
Yeah, I think Ian froze a little bit. I'll edit this.
Given the heads up in advance, that was a joy that Upper Deck allowed us into the fold for that. So thank you to Upper Deck on that one. I'm kind of going to go all around because I've got loads of little conversation. I'm sure Noren's got some stuff he wants to ask as well. But just because you just said it,
I'm okay. I don't know if it's that much. No, I'm just joking. I'm messing with Dave because Dave and I are joking around.
I've already answered all of your questions.
It's done. This was fun. So nice finally meeting you.
Let's just talk about the basketball or the football or something like that, and then we'll not talk about any of this. We'll just have a chat. I thought it was interesting because you just mentioned that you kind of moved on to other stuff. So obviously we speak to a lot of different artists and they work in a lot of different ways. And I just find it fascinating because I'm not an artist in any way like that. I mean, I've written stuff and I've written poetry before, but nothing visual. So do you kind of like, I guess the words are emotionally detached from it a little bit, and then by necessity when you move on to working on a new piece or a new commission, or
I think it's just I don't think that's related to my painting exactly. I think that's just how I am with everything. Like, whatever is in front of me is what most of my attention is focused on. And like, just, an example, like I need to get some packages ready to get to the post office before they close, but I don't have my packing tape. I need to go downstairs and get the packing tape. And then in the process of doing that, I see a thing that I meant to get to earlier, and like an hour and a half later, I'm like, oh, the post office, so it's just like very, very kind of the thing in front of me, and then I'm like, once I'm done with a project, usually I can't share it. So like this is the extreme example of that, working on all these pieces for that much time and not being able to share or talk about anything. But in general, I'm used to whatever I'm painting is probably not going to be releasing publicly for a couple of months to a year. And so I'm just really, that's just how it goes. And if I am really excited about something that I just finished, which I usually am, I'm used to being like, well, sooner or later I'll get to put this out. And by the time it releases, I'm thinking about something else. And so oftentimes I might not even really like properly share stuff that I was excited about like 6 months ago when I was painting it, but it's like, oh yeah, that. It's why if you go to my Instagram, my posts sometimes, like there will just be like these big gaps where I'm not putting anything out because it's like I don't have anything I can share right now that I'm working on, and I'm just not thinking about going back and looking at like what stuff did I, did I miss? What fell between the cracks? So,
well, for our listeners, we should also emphasize, Dave, could you talk about some of the other franchises you've worked with, some other things that we might have seen your art from?
Yeah, probably the longest running is Magic, which I'm actually I was working. Excuse me, 1 second. I was working from about 2008 for Magic the Gathering up through pretty continuously up through about the middle of Masterpieces, and then I kind of went on hiatus with them just because it was getting to that point where I needed to be focusing all my attention on the project. But yeah, so it's like a slightly more than 10-year stretch of working with Wizards of the Coast. Done a lot of Dark Horse covers, usually for either the Alien franchise and kind of like related, like Alien, Predator, Prometheus, or covers for Joe Golem, which is Mignola property, but not, as far as I know, I don't think he's ever worked on any of the comics directly, but he's kind of like I guess you'd say he's like the producer of that title. Those are super fun. It's like pulpy detective occult stuff. And,
awesome.
Yeah. If you don't know those, they're cool. You'd probably dig them. I know that you're into the weird horror stuff and that.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
I'm gonna have to check that out because I didn't know about that, but that's really awesome. Wow.
Yeah. And then those are like the easy ones. There's always like random other projects going on. I do book covers here and there. I have done like a bunch of stuff for sideshows, Court of the Dead, Sideshow Collective, and I always try to have some personal work going on. I do bits for basically like off and on doing like gallery work, which is pretty different from my commercial illustration. And is there anything that you're thinking of? I've done a bunch of illustrated novels, not that I wrote, but for other people's books.
No, I mean, I remember seeing your stuff, and I remember seeing your stuff before the Masterpieces announcement. I mean, I didn't know you or anything like that, but I followed your page, and I remember seeing the occult stuff and the horror stuff, and the sideshow piece, which I'm absolutely a huge fan of, from Court of the Dead. And I remember seeing them. I was just like, wow, this is. I had no idea about the relation or anything like that. I just knew that the art was really beautiful, because I like all that creepy stuff. And I remember seeing your work in MTG too. So I was going to Magic the Gathering. So I was like, oh, this is crazy.
Like
seeing
the biggest, longest running property that I'm connected with, but I don't think of myself as being like a prominent, like there are certain Magic artists who are kind of, I think you would say like the face of the game.
Oh, really?
Like,
wow.
Yeah, like they're like Chris Braun, for example, tends to do a lot of the like really premier pieces and that kind of thing. And so like I've been with them for a long time, but I'm just like a support player in my mind anyway. And,
the way you describe it makes me think of Saturday Night Live. In a way.
Yeah.
A little bit,
Yeah. I'm like one of those cast members who's been on for a long time, but it's like that guy. Yeah. Okay. He shows up in the background sometimes in Adam Sandler movies or something.
Yeah. The fifth Ghostbuster, that kind of thing.
You're way too modest, my friend. Way too modest. But yeah, that's amazing, man. Yeah, because I just, I know listeners, well, the real fun treat of it was when this all first started, when everyone was kind of sniffing around to try to figure out who was MM 2020. we went on many people went on a mad dash to try to figure out whose signature that was or who saw these images. And I just remember everything kind of surrounding that. Me and Ian being like, I wonder who it is, and trying to figure out all these crazy connections.
When the signature was going around, and I was like, no one's going to figure this out unless they're a diehard collector of magic, like signed magic cards, because it's indecipherable. You can kind of get my initials from it, but I'm missing a lot of letters when I sign my name.
Well, interestingly, a lot of people, one of the first big guesses were Dave DeVries. A lot of people thought it was Dave DeVries.
For some reason, because of the D, we all were kind of like, oh, really? No way. Could it be him coming back or whatever? And then I remember it going around that everyone thought it was the bodybuilder that shares the name with you, which was hilarious. I was like,
I wonder if he got any of my email for a change. I get his email every once in a while. And,
I guarantee you did. I guarantee you someone was like, all right, what pieces do you have? Let's see them. I guarantee you that happened.
You see, this is where the two Daves, you see, because Dave DeVries gets David DeVries his checks.
Yeah,
an Australian artist. So
poor guy.
That's next level. So
yeah, that is next level. Well, if you start getting the other guy's checks, that's when you know you've properly crossed the streams. Yeah. So how long did it take you to because you did 135 pieces, I think I read, which I think is the same as the figure that Simone did for 2018. How long did that take you, start to finish?
So I got contacted in June of 2018, and then there was kind of a longer period than you might expect of just kind of like getting contracts in order, things like that. Like I think it was probably August that I actually started getting to functionally like do anything. And then, that carried through April of this year. So just under 2 years. And I was still doing work with other clients while that was going on, and gradually taking less until probably. So I took another project that I knew was a bad idea, but I couldn't say no to in the fall of 2019. And that was the point where I was like, nothing else comes in until this is all finished up in April. And then effectively from like January to April, I was just 100% working on Marvel. So, yeah, it was like very much a ramping up at the beginning. And by the end there, I was just like really in the rhythm, and everything was moving at like a very smooth, fast pace.
Wow, that's good. Wow.
That's awesome. So, when we spoke to Jennifer Wu, she mentioned how she found Simone Bianchi and how she found him at a con, and then they ended up talking. So how were you kind of tapped for this? How did that story come along?
I don't know. I was actually, because I know you guys talked to Jen, and I haven't heard the interview yet because you haven't released it as of
this week
while we're talking right now. So I was hoping that story might be in there, but apparently it's not. I don't know. She had actually written to me probably a year earlier, I want to say, or 6 months to a year prior, about doing a project that had nothing to do with any of this. And I think it was something where it was like the timing of it, or it might have been just like the scope of what they needed and the time that they had to get it done just was not going to work for me. And so I had to turn it down. And then the next I heard from her was an email that was like, we're going to send you an NDA. We want to talk to you about a project. Or I don't remember how she worded it. It was something, she might have said it was for Marvel. I don't remember. But it was something where I was just kind of like, that sounds like a Marvel Masterpieces set, but that's not what it's going to be. Because why would that be something that they would talk to me about. Like it was just kind of like, okay, send me the paperwork. I would love to hear whatever this thing is going to be. And then we got on the phone after I sent in my NDA, and that was when we like had the first real kind of like conversation about details or anything. So,
wow. Well, it makes total sense seeing the art now, of course. I mean, just amazing.
Well,
it was something that, yeah, I didn't. I think that she did mention the work I've done for Dark Horse as being something that they were looking at. I don't remember if she mentioned magic, but that seems like it might have been relevant. But yeah, it's something that I was like, I don't really have superhero experience, but I definitely am interested, like that was something that I thought that I was going to do before I started learning how to paint. I thought I was going to draw comic books. And specifically, I was always a Marvel fan. So yeah, when it was just like, oh my God, I just kind of at a certain point figured I don't think this is what I'm going to do. But it turns out like I'm super excited. Yeah, like
it's crazy.
It does feel karma. It kind of feels like karmically, it feels like the right thing. But I'm saying 100%, and not, I'm not living your life or you. So,
yeah. It's I don't feel like I don't know. To me, it was more of just kind of like, I am really appreciative that I'm getting this opportunity, and I'm appreciative that I'm getting it now as opposed to at some point in the past, because I feel like I've made a lot of, I've learned a lot of things from prior experience on other things that I'm glad I didn't learn on this job. You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
Like if I had gotten this sooner, I think I would have very possibly not been up to the challenge or not done a job that I would be happy with in the end. So I felt like it came at a good time also.
Oh, wow.
How long after that conversation with Upper Deck did you ring your mum?
Legally, she found out when you guys found out. I don't know.
Interesting. Okay, there we go. Very good answer.
Nice.
Very good answer. I tried, Noran. Impressively done. How many of these? I'm always curious about this. Do you have? Because I know that if you're like a film person, for example, or an actor in a play, they have kind of some sort of obligation to do a certain amount of PR for things. And I guess in this day and age, it's not like Joe Gisco back in '92 where they did a comic shop tour across America. And I guess also for this one, even with Simone in 2018, was able to have that gallery opening at Metropolis in New York, which obviously you're not going to be able to do this time for reasons. So how, I know that you've done a YouTube video with a fine fella recently, but have you got kind of quite a lot of these lined up that you kind of have been asked to do to promote the product, I guess?
I have a couple, and I'm not really sure exactly. So Upper Deck had contacted me. I think you spoke with Jody about arranging some of these, and she's been setting up a couple of other PR things. Initially, I think it was part of my contract that I'm supposed to be at like X number of convention appearances and that sort of thing, and I still want to. Hopefully next year, get to go to New York Comic-Con or San Diego or whatever's going to be going on back when cons start back up again. But there's a few, not a lot. Weirdly, like this week, I'm also talking to a couple other people, but it's like about other stuff, and I never really do interviews, so it's just like a weirdly busy week. Just everybody happens to be, maybe it's the time of the year, everybody's like launching different things, but,
possibly.
So for the set, I think we're ready, Ian. I think we're ready to get into this. We can't talk about everything. We can only talk about what was revealed. But in terms of some of the pieces we've seen, all right, are there any stories with those pieces, things you were especially excited about with one of the pieces, or anything fun stories that we could hear about just to get a little understanding?
I wish that we could talk about everything.
I know.
Because I know we've only seen a fraction of it. So
we've only seen a fraction of the beauties.
10% maybe, I guess.
Right, probably, yeah.
There's been about 14 pieces released.
If you're up for it, we'll have a no holds barred everything interview once the set is all public.
Yeah.
Definitely going to have to.
Although we won't force you to go through all 135 pieces. We'd never do that.
That's not what we talked about, Ian.
Oh.
Sorry, Dave. We have our plan.
I don't know where to start. I feel like I'm better at reacting than at.
Well, can I start then? I'll start if you don't mind. With
I know where you're going to start.
No. You think I'm going to go Black Cat? I'm not. I'm going to go Wolverine. Ooh. The reason I'm going to go Wolverine is because A, I know a lot more people dig Wolverine than Black Cat, and B is because we both know your photo reference for that painting. Our buddy Pat. So I'm just at least I believe he was photo reference for that painting. This is where it's going to be horribly embarrassing if you say no, he wasn't. We've only seen the what if version of that, so we haven't kind of seen it clean without all of the artwork on there.
Fair point. Yeah. So on my site I only had the available pieces up, and since that piece is that one went off to Upper Deck, and so
okay.
I don't have that anymore, so I didn't post the image, but I should put that up in the gallery just for it to use.
Yeah, sorry, I'm looking at the images that Upper Deck released as part of the teaser, if you like.
They used the Hulk 181, I think.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. I guess first of all for me is the choice of costume on that, because it's a. And this is where I get hazy. You'll probably tell me I'm wrong because my Wolverine knowledge isn't the best. But that looks like a very early.
So I am curious. So he had that very first costume, and then he went at a certain point to that kind of like golden brown.
Yes.
You know the one I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And then I think it came back to this costume.
Yes.
Afterwards. And I feel like this is not the early version, because the early version, his mask looked kind of strange.
Yeah, they had a different thing going on with his face.
It was
I don't think they had the
more
points.
cat-like.
Yeah.
That's right.
So I don't know if maybe in the end the way it came out is somewhere in between the two, but I think just going by the mask, like I interpret this as what I think of just kind of his most long running classic costume. So that was one of the things that they were actually kind of specific about, was which costume version of the characters. They weren't real specific about very many things, but I did get a big kind of like reference spot that was for excuse me, whatever characters I was going to be doing. Like here's reference of what that character looks like, and I think that there might have been a couple in there where there were various costumes included, which kind of to me suggested use whatever costume you. And it's possible for the other ones I could have used whatever costume I wanted either, but I just was like, okay, this is, we're going with yellow costume Wolverine, so I'm good with that,
That's awesome.
But yeah, and I honestly, I do like that brown and gold costume, but this one feels like the classic to me, so...
Yeah, definitely. I think I love this one too, and I love what you did with the composition too, right? I love seeing the cityscape behind him and kind of like leaping out with all the hoodlums, whatever they're called, the standard villains that are down
Red
there.
Shirts.
getting all slashed up. Poor guys. But I love it, man. Just so much fun, and it's so iconic Wolverine too. I remember when I saw it, I was kind of like, oh wow, that's kind of perfect for him. And it works really well with what they're doing with the card and the text for the what if as well.
Thanks. Yeah. So I have gotten to see at this point all of the what ifs from they sent me like all the stuff to sign,
cool.
and that was, I think, like one of the most fun things is going through and just seeing, like, they were not always choosing whatever I would have expected for that character to be the cover design. You know what I mean? Like in this case, to pick Hulk 181, like they could have gone with any number of iconic Wolverine covers, like the Wolverine #1. That was like his, I want to say like 80s when he had his first like solo title,
Oh, the Frank Miller one, 84.
Yes, yeah.
That was, yeah.
Well, that was the miniseries, but then he got just like his own ongoing series.
That's right.
So like there's a bunch of different ones they could have gone with. But so going with the first appearance was cool, and it was really fun to get to see. Like they did such a good job. There were some pieces in the set that actually, when I'm looking at like how they printed, I felt like the colors were a little different from what I expected them to look like, like, because I know what the original looks like. But then when I saw them with the what if titles on, it almost felt kind of like, okay, they're kind of like it to play with the, I don't know if that's the case, but that's what it seemed to me, because everything with the what if looks like fantastic. Like,
sure.
Wow.
They just look super cool.
That's pretty awesome. Yeah, it must be a crazy experience to see these, because what's really lovely about what you've done on your site where you're selling them is that you put them on the easel.
On the easel.
As well.
Beautiful.
So beautiful. I mean, what a great you rock, Dave. I mean, being able to let us see. No, seriously, man. And the camera collection as well, which is really great.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, which is sick. I love it.
Slowly taking over.
We collectors understand this feeling, so no worries whatsoever. You're in good company. I think that was a really beautiful choice, because it's weird when you see a painting flat, when you see a digital image of a painting as opposed to seeing a canvas, and obviously you're wise enough to make it tilted so you can really see the light play well on the piece, and it just makes, like, I'm looking at Star-Lord now and looking at the difference. I love them both 100%. But looking at how the image sits flat as a digital image as opposed to on canvas, those blue and reds, that's crazy. The blue, how that blue from the blaster and the red explosion behind him, such a contrast, really plays with the dimensions of the piece. And you can just really tell from seeing a painting. Like, I think that's the thing I was the most jealous of with Bianchi and people getting to go to the gallery, I think, is because there really is no other more experience than seeing these beautiful pieces in person. Like, you just don't get the full effect right away.
Yeah. And that's like, honestly, I don't want to be holding on to these indefinitely until at some point in the future I would be able to put together an in-person show. So I am a little bit like bummed out about not getting to do something along those lines. I remember probably when I was a student going to the Brandywine Art Museum and seeing all of N.C. Wyeth's Treasure Island paintings. Like, when you go there, they have the one full gallery when you walk in, and it's just they're all lined up along the walls, and every piece, I think each one of them is 30 by 40. They're fairly big, but they're all the same. They're all the same size and shape as each other, and there's something really cool about that too. Like, seeing all of this series of related images that are all like, you took pages from the books and made them enormous and put them on the wall, and you can just stand there in a room and see them all at the same time. And I didn't get to go see the Bianchi show, but I've seen photos of it, and it looks like a similar experience of just that kind of like that presence,
moment. Yeah, we get to see them all. Well, hopefully one day us collectors can have something where we can bring our collections to a show or something, and, we can have, do a thing or whatever. But, talking about the pieces and the sizes and all that kind of stuff, the thing I really want to start getting in the habit of doing on the show is talking to the artists and asking them, what are your brushes, your paints? What were your choices on the canvas sizes? Just to get a behind the scenes on your time creating these pieces.
Yeah, I honestly don't change that stuff up very much. I have the surface that I work on, the brushes that I work with, the palette that I put out. It's pretty much, from one thing to the next, the same. The size of the piece will change, depending on how it's going to be printed. Usually, if I know something like the pieces I did for Sideshow Collectibles that I knew were going to be printed as large posters, those paintings were all done fairly big for me, because I know they're going to be printed big. Something that's going to be reduced to a trading card, I usually would do those at 12 by 16, which is what most of these are. Some of them I did larger. It's funny you mentioned the camera collection, because I have this real kind of fixation on I really enjoy photography, and I also really enjoy the experience of handling these objects, all the different cameras, and each one has its own cool things about it. Each one is kind of like a little beautiful piece of industrial design, some more than others, of course, but there is a fetishization of the tools, and I'm very much aware that doesn't make the photos better, that there's no reason I ever need to buy one single other camera or lens at this point. I could get rid of 90% of what I have and be fine for the rest of my life. But I still think it's just fun to experiment and play with. When it comes to my painting, it's the complete opposite. I figured out what works for me, and then I just keep doing it and don't think about it at all going forward. And the only reason I ever probably I had to start experimenting with new brands of brushes because the kinds I was using for so many years was discontinued, and it got to be impossible to find them, and so it's not this isn't fun for me. It's not, it's not I can't wait to go try out some new brushes. It's all right, I got to try and find something that's going to work and not get chewed up real fast, because, I don't know. I guess that means that I probably do have real specific reasons for arriving at the decisions. Let me see if I can kind of go through those. I work on panel. I've always preferred a rigid surface. I think that canvas looks great and has a certain interesting way that the paint kind of blends really nicely on canvas, which is something to do with the texture and the bounce of it. So it does in some ways make it easier to work with, but I like the kind of hard edge crispness that panel gives me, and so that tends to be more often what I work on. I almost never deviate from that, and I like to prime it with a really kind of rough sort of texture. I don't think it's really easy to see in any of these. You'd have to really get in there and look closely, but on the originals you can see that they have ripples and pebbles in the surface. I think that's something for me that just makes whenever I'm doing anything that has a dry brush effect, it can pull out some really interesting organic textures there that I wouldn't have been able to plan, but they really look cool on the piece. And also, there's lots of cat hair just floating around my house, and you don't notice as much of it. And this is half a joke, but it's really seriously, when the painting is done and you're varnishing it and putting it in a frame, and there's like hair and dust and stuff inevitably always in any surface. So the more meticulous your surface is, the more that stuff is annoying. And I think that at some point I was just like, I'm just going to go the other way and make my surface chaotic. And then that stuff just kind of blends right in, and it's a camera.
So are you telling me that there's actual cat hair on the black cat paint?
Oh yeah. My surface is like at least 4% cat hair. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. That makes me feel.
That's the secret ingredient. You're not supposed to give that update. That's the secret sauce, man.
Yeah. And then, sorry, go ahead.
No, please.
The brushes I work with tend to be just, I like square tip. I have a few certain sizes that I always use. My color palette, it's very bright and prismatic. And if you've been familiar with my work prior to the Marvel stuff, my work tends to be not very bright and prismatic. And I don't know why those two things happen to be happening at the same time, but I work with really, I think that part of it is I did learn a lot of, I was going to school to learn to paint, and then close to when I was graduating, I started working on trying to get an illustration portfolio together. And that was when I went and actually sat down and took some lessons from my mom and from Boris. And a lot of my palette, I think, is influenced by them. And it's changed over, 15-ish years. But yeah, they both have a very prismatic, lots of cadmiums and things like that. So there are certain things about my process that have changed over the years, but there's always these weird little holdovers. And I think the biggest one that's changed very little from what I learned from working with them was my palette choices.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. Wow. So I noticed a couple of them. You can see that you did them a little bit bigger, and the Spider-Man one looks to be one of those larger ones, if I'm not mistaken, from looking at this. And that's absolutely astonishing. And we know that's one of two that you've done, at least, because they released the image of one of the Canvas Gallery cards, I believe, uses and that actually makes sense to me. Well, obviously, Peter Parker being a photographer, but with your cameras in there as obviously in the background there. So that one that they released, did you actually use any specific lens of any one of your cameras? I kind of almost don't want to say which one it is. No, that's fine. That's fine. I'm just curious.
Just as long as you sell it with the painting or sell it as an artifact item. I think that's the most important part.
I intend to keep it because I like shooting with it, but I did want it to be something that Peter Parker may have used in a kind of sort of 60s, possibly even 70s era. He probably wouldn't have used it in the 70s. I think it would have been a little out of date by then. But also he was always on a shoestring budget, so who knows? I don't know.
See, I love that so much that you took the time to make it contextually accurate, make it fun. See, that's what matters, though.
That's just my camera nerd, though.
But I like that. That's good.
Listen, we're two for two at the moment. We've got cat hair on the black cat painting, and we've got one of your actual cameras, one of your favorite cameras, in one of the Spider-Man paintings. So this is going well. Yeah,
it's whenever you're working on these things, you're sitting there in your room by yourself, and you got to make it fun.
100%.
There are so many pieces here that I'm gobsmacked by all of them, quite frankly. Another one that really, we've touched on Star-Lord, but another one that stood out for me just because of how different it is to the other ones that we've seen so far, and I think by necessity because of the sensory nature of the character, is the Daredevil. Which I believe you put an Instagram post up and mentioned a little bit about your thinking behind that piece, but just kind of for our listeners. And Daredevil's a big, I'm a big Daredevil fan along with Spidey. So tell us a little bit about your kind of thinking and your choices on that one.
Yeah, so I wanted to be really minimalist on this particular one, and I tried not to do that too often with these, like have just a figure on an actual plain flat background or anything, but in this case it felt appropriate to me because I wanted that sense of like, it always seems to me like when Daredevil's really like concentrating, like that kind of like he's listening for a really specific he's like trying to find a person who's been kidnapped or trying to track the villain who's making their getaway. And so he's like up there on the rooftop and he's just like filtering out everything and really trying to just hear that one very specific sound that he's looking for. So yeah, I wanted to have him in that sort of almost like gargoyle pose, like perched up there on the corner of the roof. And black, white, and red as a color combination, I think always has a really kind of like dynamic punch to it. So with the red costume, just the idea of having him on this really kind of like stark, empty background with the concentric rings of the sonar felt like a way to go. It was every once in a while with one of these also is one of those things where I'm like, I feel certain that I've seen this. Like you get an idea and you're like, somebody's done this, right? And I'm sure that somebody has done this, but I couldn't find anything that looked quite like what I wanted to do. And so that's the main thing is like all these characters have been imagined and visualized so many times, so as long as it's not like too much like, oh yeah, like I was constantly, as I was sketching these, like getting on Google, and if I had an idea for something like, wait, let me at least check all the other Masterpieces versions of this character, like
make sure there's no copy specifically in the Masterpiece. Well, Daredevil has that graphic. I feel like for me, like Frank Miller, Daredevil, like there's Daredevil issues and Daredevil pieces I've seen where you always see that graphic presence, right? Because Daredevil has that kind of graphic weight to him because his silhouette's so well defined that you get to have those moments. But I think honestly, it's one of my favorite pieces. And it didn't take until maybe like the third or fourth time I was stalking the photo where I noticed the ledge was red.
Yes.
I didn't catch it.
It's like he's made of the same material as that gargoyle reference you just made.
That's really
and that kind of clicked as soon as you said that. I'm like, of course, that's.
I think it's just I really think it's a great piece, and I think, and Ian and I have talked about this privately too. Like some of the Masterpiece cards and things that your mom has done, as Boris has done, and other Masterpiece artists that our listeners will know about. I think when they vary it up and they do these kind of like quick little surprises or like, 2 or 3 or 4 pieces, like however many it is, I find it extremely refreshing, and you get that kind of, I don't know, just it's something that works on a big canvas and then works on a really small space too. Yeah. That I think I really appreciate the piece. Really lovely.
And that's something like getting so many years of doing the Magic cards really helped me kind of figure out how to create images that are going to read small, because those are even smaller. Like they're printed on a card the same size, but they only get half of the card dedicated to the image. Yeah, because there's the probably in part because of working on those, but at some point I got in the habit of doing my preliminaries as small pieces. Typically I would do them around 4 by 6 inches. I did prelims for these at 5 by 7 for all the pieces in the set, and that was something I know it's gonna, if it works at that size, as a painting at that size. So when I'm, sketching out my idea and I'm gathering my reference and putting everything together, if I can't make it work as a little 5 by 7 monochromatic painting, something's wrong. the structure of it. Wow. I need to go back and rearrange my composition. I need to clarify my shapes. Something is off in the value scale. Like if it's not working at that small size, then I know it's going to be a waste of time to try and fix it in the painting. It's like fundamentally a flaw, needs to be corrected at that point.
Brilliant. That's amazing. We've seen examples of that from other people as well. For your preliminary pieces, you said they were monochromatic. I'm sorry, my ignorance. My ignorance isn't. I don't know that much about this stuff. The Black Widow one we saw was red with black. Yeah.
I'm using monochromatic a little bit loosely because you're right. They are black and white on a red surface, which because black and white actually have slight color variations to them. It's all, it's physical paint. So wow. I actually get a little bit of color and temperature variation just from the thickness of it also. So if I put down a really thin gray on top of the red, it's going to be different. If I put a thick gray, it's going to be cooler. If I put it thin, it's going to have more of the red showing through, so it's going to be warmer. So I get a little bit of like playing with temperature and color on those. I do have a couple here to show you guys of those. I can't show you many, unfortunately, because most of the, they have the redemptions for the sketches. So most of the base, all of the base set pieces have already been sent out to Upper Deck, and most of the images that have been released are from base set cards. So I only have a few here, but my screen is so tiny.
Wow.
But yeah, so like this is what we're talking about with the way that I can get like the gray almost comes out like the blue in Spider-Man's costume.
Gotcha.
And then in this case, I'm just leaving the red like completely just untouched because the red of his costume really pops. It's part of what's going to make the image work. So, like I said, I only
Dave, that's beautiful, man.
Oh, like here's a Star-Lord. And so. Oh, and I got this one out. I wanted to show the process from start to finish. So initially, I'm doing something. I don't know if you can see this. I can see it if it makes it easier. But this is just my pencil where I'm kind of like working out. I probably have a bunch of Venoms. Venom was a tough one for me.
Oh, really?
I was going to ask if there was any particular character that we've seen that was a challenge. So,
there's one that was like really hard, and I can't explain why. And it's a character I ended up having to do several times, but they haven't shown any pictures yet. So
of course, yeah.
Didn't talk
Silver
about that,
Surfer, right? Got it. So I'm just kidding. Bad joke. I'm sorry.
Nice try. Nice try.
I was just getting that in there.
It might be in a different book. Sometimes I would be like working on. So it might have been that I was working on Venom and just not happy with what I was coming up with, and I was like, all right, well, I've got 134 other characters to work on here. So I'm going to give Venom a break and come back later. And then, like, I think that was what happened here because I'm not seeing him in this book. But in any case, after a bunch of, like, not good Venoms, end up with the one that I decided to go with on this piece. And then from that point, I actually sent that in to Samantha, who was my art director. And I would send her because I knew there's going to be time that gets eaten up in the approvals process.
Yeah.
And with this many pieces, I wasn't sure how that was going to affect my schedule. It's like, I know I can get this work done, but if it takes like a month to get feedback or whatever, that could run into problems as far as like me just sitting on my hands waiting for something to do. So I wanted to, which it turned out to really not be the case. Like, they were very quick with feedback. But I wanted to always have multiple stages in process at the same time.
Sure.
So I would do a whole group of these pencils, like the one I was just showing you, and send those in to Samantha, and then she would give me notes based on those. Most of the time, it was just like, that looks great, go on ahead. Every once in a while, there was a thing like, oh, there's like certain rules, like you guys are probably familiar with some of the things that cannot be shown on a card,
Yep.
you know, that.
Yeah.
And I got those up front, but it turned out there were always like one or two other things where they're like, oh, that's not really like a rule, but maybe don't do that. Like, it's kind of,
Yeah.
So like she would kind of catch things like that at that stage. And then I would shoot models, shoot photos. You mentioned Pat King being Wolverine. And there were a number of other people that I was working with on these, bring models into the studio and shoot a bunch. And something else, because I knew that I was going to be doing so many of these pieces, that helped me be really efficient was if I could get a bunch of the rough concepts worked out ahead of time. You know, I could bring Pat in and I could shoot like photos for 9 different cards all in one session, which ordinarily, like the kind of work that I'm doing, I'll bring a model in and we'll shoot for like one thing, you know? So it was great. And honestly, like really, I lucked out that I had decided to just close out all of my model shoots before COVID hit. So at that point, like I already had all the reference I needed to carry me through.
Wow.
But because that would have made it a challenge. But yeah, and then at that point, that's when I do the little studies, which is this is what goes then for approval so that I can get started in the final. And yeah, Samantha takes this, passes it along to whoever she's talking to at Marvel, which again is like anything that is not me talking to Samantha is like behind an opaque wall, and I don't know what's going on. And then she comes back with whatever notes, if they have any notes for me on those. I think there were only a couple that I had to repaint. Most of the time, if there were notes, they were something that was like, this is good to go, just keep in mind whatever, you know, like there's a costume detail here that it looks like might not be quite right or something like that. Yeah, there were one or two where there was something that they just felt was like tonally not what they wanted to see for that character. And then this is one of the big ones. I don't know. and just the final.
Wow. Look at that, man. I love seeing the lights on in the building. What a great
thanks. Yeah, and so then most of them are not that big. That was something that I did for characters that were either pieces that I was really excited about, or a character that was like a particularly like Spider-Man or Wolverine or something. Yeah. So this is more, you can see.
Wow.
Oh, gotcha.
The difference in scale between the two.
Wow.
But,
wow.
It's about half the size.
Yeah.
The bulk of them.
That Taskmaster, man, including Vision, Iron Man, and Cap in there, absolutely amazing.
Thanks.
What a great shot.
It's just, I can't talk, which is not good for a podcast, but I'm just slightly speechless. I'm just taking in that Taskmaster again, because obviously we've only seen the image of it released as the Canvas Gallery. And when you look at that, the lettering on it actually covers most of that bottom sort of 20% of the card. So seeing that clean image there's a lot of detail that I just missed.
Yeah, I think that I have that one up on my. Do I have that one up here?
You might do, to be fair. I'm just
on the shot.
But no, I mean, you're absolutely right. I don't have the original on hand of this one, but the Spider-Man through the lens. That's another one where the canvas gallery kind of, like, I think the lens effect still comes through very clearly.
Absolutely.
Very clearly.
It definitely, to me, like, feels like seeing it with no
How did I see? The thing is, this is what I like about almost all of the masterpieces works from all the different artists. Is every time I look at them, and some of them I've looked at for decades, this is maybe the third time I've looked at this Taskmaster one, and you're right, I have found the painting image that was on your site now. I don't know why, but I didn't notice who the characters were at the bottom until this very moment, because I'm drawn focus to him. I've just been studying him.
And it's, I think I kind of wanted them to be a second read, because it's not a versus card. It's not Taskmaster versus the Avengers. It was just kind of a supporting detail to the story, but the story is him. So
yes.
Wow. And I love the writing you put in the shield too. Like in the image on the site, you can see it, and in the painting you can see it. But when you start seeing it in person, you can really see the grooves. Like I feel like they just isn't that weird? Like I know it's just my eye, but it just feels like it really has the texture in there really nicely with the lettering. Wow.
Yeah.
Absolutely cool. It's crazy to see the size difference though, in person, like the difference between 12 by 16 and 18 by 24. Just really amazing to see that difference.
Yeah. And there were certain ones that I initially planned which ones were going to be small and which ones were going to be big. And then often it would come down to the day that I was going to start painting it. And I would just be like, this doesn't need to be 18 by 24. This is a 12 by 16 or the other way around.
Yeah.
Somewhere else. Like, I don't think I'm not going to be able to do it the way I want to do it small. It needs to be bigger. Yeah, there's a couple that I haven't shown yet. That there's one offline. Norrin and I were talking about characters that are kind of like, I guess you would say, stringers, and I don't think this is one of the characters that we were talking about, but there's one piece I did that I'm curious to see what people's reactions are going to be, because it's like the most grandiose piece I could do of a character that I think like nobody cares about at all, including me.
Love it.
Like I just got really carried away. It's a character that I don't think I've ever even read a comic about or anything, but I just like, for personal reasons, just got like really, really captured with this one, and it's like, this one's got to be an 18 by 24. I'm not even going to put it up for sale because no one's going to buy it. This one's just for me. This is a keeper. Like I said, you gotta keep yourself amused sometimes. So,
yeah.
Be surprised. Like Ian and I have and our fellow groups in Collectors Club and other people in the group have picked secondary characters that no one cares about, because you can collect them. So no joke. Yeah. It's pretty crazy, because I think what's really funny, like Ian said earlier, we do spend a lot of time with these cards and look at them over and over again. There are some cards that I look at, like the 2099 off-brand characters from 93 Marvel Masterpiece, like just random characters that, people have drawn. And I look back and I'm like, you know what? This is a really cool image. I don't know what it is. Yeah.
Well, and I think it is very obviously hard to disconnect your personal attachment to the character. We all have our favorites. And so, obviously that's going to play a big part. And I'm used to that also with the people who collect magic art, is that the artist and the painting in some cases come secondary to the nostalgia attached to, this is a card that I have had in my deck for 10 years, or I won a really important game in a tournament with this card. People have attachments to something that is not aesthetic about it. But ultimately, it's still like the artist is trying to do their best with each piece to do justice to that character, to make it really cool. And I also kind of had this feeling like there's a lot of pressure on like the Wolverines and Spider-Mans and stuff because you know it's such an important character.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the kind of more peripheral or more like D-listers, there's this feeling of like, if I hit this one out of the park, this could even be kind of like a defining image of this character, you know?
I had that with 2018. It's rather random. I don't know. I know why I went after it because I got the one of one red Spectrum, but then it was, and then I kind of built from there.
Yeah, I mean, if you've already got that, so.
yeah, it's kind of a no-brainer
there.
but it's Wonder Man, and it's one of Simone's brightest pieces. I think it's one of the only ones with the white background.
With the white background, yeah. I think so.
But just having now. That caught my interest, and then I went back and I read some of the character because I wasn't really familiar with it, and I did some Avengers, and then I looked at how he's been portrayed in other cards throughout the years, and Simone just clearly had fun with that character. You can tell that he had fun. He almost kind of reinvented it in a way, in the way that he represented it. And we've spoken at length about this, so I won't go into it too much here. But an example would be Morbius. Where he had Morbius was on some sort of weird floating rock thing, where he kind of did this otherworldly thing, and you can tell that he just had fun with it. And that character obviously is much more into the forefront now because of the movie stuff, but some of those characters, and you look at it and you think, I actually genuinely don't know who that character is, and I've never read them. I know them because I've seen them in other card sets, but I feel like I'm seeing a new version of that character.
There were a few. So like I got to ask for whatever characters I wanted to do, and I didn't get all of them. As you guys are familiar with, there are certain reasons that some of them just aren't on the table. But then they also filled out the list from there, and because there was still plenty of slots to get filled up, and so there were characters that I had no like awareness of at all, and had to kind of like go do my homework and learn about them. But yeah, I do like, I agree. I remember looking at his, I think it was Absorbing Man.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I remember Absorbing Man because I used to be a fan of Secret Wars. And so it's like, you have that, like, I remember I read Secret Wars like 5 times. Like, I know who Absorbing Man is. Like, maybe he never showed up in many other comics, after the 70s or whatever, but, or early 80s, I guess, is when Secret Wars came out. But yeah, it's like, I remember like, that's a really cool Absorbing Man. And he's actually like, he's a pretty fun character, like not one that you see very often. And it's cool to see like somebody really like go all in with that.
Deep cuts.
Yeah. Deep cuts. Well, I mean, that's kind of what, from a lot of our experiences with other collectors we've had on the show, and I'm sure yours too, Dave, when you're a kid and you're looking at these trading cards, that kind of what happens, right? You see a character you don't know, and then you look at the power meter, or you look about the about me, right? Or you look at the note, like the fun fact, and you kind of fall in love with different characters from different comics, because no one can read everything, right? But in a way, the trading cards kind of give you a sneak peek at everybody. That's one of that's one of the things I loved from being when I was a kid and getting to look at Marvel trading cards, was like seeing all these cool different iterations of characters.
I think my favorite power meter was the Jim Lee X-Men cards that had the graph.
Yes, it looked like the Cerebro graph, right? Like the green, red Predator type of thing. Yes.
I definitely remember looking at those power meters and comparing with friends to see which character was better. Because of course it's all about their costume design and their power graph.
Right. That's all that matters.
Can I ask a really meta question? And I apologize for this in advance. Did your mum ever take you to the store to buy trading cards?
Oh yeah, I mean, we would go. Yeah, there were a couple of comic shops in the town that I grew up in, and there was one in particular that I feel like we went to most often. So mostly I remember getting trading cards more at conventions. And I think that probably, like, I know for sure when they were doing stuff for not the 96 cards, but prior to that, like, I think my mom did some at the 93. Is that right?
Yeah, she did.
Yeah.
And so hanging out at the Skybox booth, and there was this one guy who I want to say Mike White, maybe. I was so young at the time, but I remember he was very nice, and he would always give us like boxes of product, which as a kid at that age, I'm pretty sure I still have all my Skybox Pogs, you know, from
Pogs, yes.
And yeah, it was like super fun. And then a couple years after that, I remember going to the store, and that was when I was starting to get more into the game cards. Like, I was into Magic a little bit, but it always felt like everybody else. The game had only been around for like 3 years, but it felt like everybody else had much better cards and was more invested in it. And so I would play like weird other card games, like the original Star Wars card game and stuff like that. Those I remember definitely like getting to go to the comic store and being like, okay, I'm going to buy a pack of Star Wars cards. And, yeah. Very clearly.
Sorry. I know it's a random question. I just, in my head, it's a bit Back to the Future. You've now made a big trading card set. You know, one of the premier brands that obviously your mother and Boris worked on back in the day.
I actually had forgotten about this until like 2 days ago. But I was on one of their cards also that Boris used a photo of me for Psylord, I think, the Franklin Richards character. And he did his Boris thing with me. Like, he made me look like the Hollywood, square-jawed version of me.
You were chiseled.
Not at all what I looked like, and I think he probably put a year or two on, But yeah, I was just thinking about it. I was like, oh yeah, forgot about that.
That's crazy.
I'm just going to look that card up because I do have it.
That's hilarious.
That's like absolutely not my chin. But this beard is necessary to kind of like make the shape the way that it should be. But,
Dave, there's the Dorian Gray painting that you wanted in the
if I had a chin like that, I probably wouldn't need it. So
I see. That's the kind of nugget of information we sometimes get.
I love that.
I just absolutely love it because you would have heard we had Ken Barrow from Skybox on. You may have heard that. And so he may well have been around at one of those cons as well. You never know, because he certainly did the tour with Joe Driscoll for '92. Was Joe's minder throughout a lot of that. One thing I thought was really lovely and touching, and I'm sure you've seen them as well, is both Joe and Simone posting kind of lovely. I mean, I'm reading Simone's now. I'm welling up looking at it, partly because I'm a softie, but partly because it's so emotional and from the heart.
Yeah, I really, I mean, for one thing, like, such big shoes to fill coming in, and then to be like so warmly welcomed as that. And yeah, Joe has he's commented on a couple of the pieces that I've posted, or at least on one of the pieces that I posted on Instagram also. And yeah, it's really, it's like, I don't know how to respond to this. It's like, I don't know what to say. And I remember meeting him back in the 90s at least one convention I remember meeting him at. And so, yeah, it's all very surreal. It's a very kind of like, didn't expect to find myself here kind of.
As if 2020 couldn't get any weirder. Did you? So you must have gone to an awful lot of cons when you were small in the 90s. I know you mentioned it on your post when you announced.
More than most kids my age would have gotten to go to. Not like a ton, because my folks didn't really ever do a ton of shows. They would do them fairly selectively. But it was like whenever I got to go, it always felt to me like getting to go in the best kind of way, because you get like I was saying, you get to get like lots of free stuff from the. I remember there were like some shows. There was always like some kind of access or special thing. And it's the kind of stuff that I think back on it now, and it's like kind of dumb, but at the time it really meant like the world. And I remember there was this one convention we went to that I think it was one of these ones where it was like somebody put on a show who had never done one before, and they were like, this is going to be the best show ever. And it was amazing. And apparently they just like lost their shirt doing it and never did it. But I remember going to this one in Charlotte in the early 90s that was one of the things that they had there was a big room full of computers where people were all playing like Duke Nukem on a LAN. Oh, wow. And this was like at a time when that was super novel, like, and so I just remember like spending like half the convention in a dark room playing Duke Nukem with strangers, and it just being like the best thing. That I was like, this is amazing. I don't want to leave. And like I think back now, it's like all the other cool stuff that I'm sure was going on that I was missing, but like as like an 11-year-old, I was like, I don't want lunch. Come back for me later. I'm just going to be
like
here.
Valhalla, man. Like you can't get no better, especially at that point, man. I can only imagine. Wow, how insane.
There was, I think it was a Diamond Retailers show that I got to go to where somebody had a VR set up for, do you remember, or have you ever heard of Dactyl Nightmare? It was like a really early virtual reality game that I don't think it was much of a game. Like, I don't think you really did anything except stand there and pterodactyls are flying around. Yeah. And maybe you had a pistol that you could shoot at them with or something. But it was like getting to play virtual reality in the 90s as a kid is like, I'm in the future. We're all going to be doing this in 10 years,
Of course. And then 20 years time, Pokemon Go comes around. So,
living the best, man.
My interest in video games kind of left me at some point over the years, but at that time I was just kind of like,
VR at that time though, man, that was like, I remember the Nintendo glove and the headset. Like I remember seeing that stuff and I was like, this is the future. We're here, or like watching Johnny Mnemonic or something, all those crazy visors, Judge Dredd, all that kind of fun.
Some of those movies have not aged well, and you can see like they're so impressed with themselves. Like
The Lawnmower Man. Man. Pierce Brosnan.
There's the Michael Douglas movie that like virtual reality. It's the one where it's like he's being sexually harassed by his female boss, and I can't remember what it's called.
Disclosure.
It's a terrible movie.
Disclosure.
Yeah.
Demi Moore.
I don't recommend it. It's I don't know if it was good when it came out. It's really not aged well. But I remember that there is a like plot point that is very important about having to get into the virtual reality like file storage system. And it's that kind of thing where it's like, yes, this is definitely how it's going to work in the future. Is there's like a 3D room of like
you looking through
like file cabinets, and that's how we store our information. Yeah,
that was everywhere. Well, remember, Hackers was the same way too.
Oh, yeah. Hackers is still a lot of fun though.
Hackers is great though. I mean, not knocking Hackers, but yeah, same thing where you're like in a room and you're looking through files. Like, how do you make looking through files cool in a cyber world?
Yes.
You put a file room inside the cyber computer, and there you go.
Yeah.
Of course you do.
Is still alive.
Of course you do.
Logical.
That was a mad tangent. I love these tangents we go off on.
Sorry.
No, don't apologize. This is what we do. My first ever internet experience was Duke Nukem in Hounslow in West London, and there was a library there. And the big thing about the library is they got 2 of these monitors, and you could go on there and use them, but they hadn't yet opened it up to the public because they were still just testing the connection. And the guy said to me, "Hey, sit down there." He logged me straight onto Duke Nukem, and I'm the same as you. I was like, my lunch break was just like gone. I hadn't got any food or anything like that. It was like, and half of that time was spent dialing up after the connection dropped. So,
oh yeah, when I was in high school in my first couple years of college, I was also working at a comic store, which they decided to set up. I think it was only like 4 computers, set up a LAN in the back, which I'm pretty sure was a poor business decision. I don't think they possibly could have recouped the expenses of doing it, but it was like many nights after locking up the store, like hanging out in the back with a couple of friends and, playing whatever, what's the one? Diablo.
Diablo, yeah.
There was some World War II first-person shooter that we would play a lot. But yeah, there's something about, and I don't really enjoy playing those online so much, but something about like sitting in a room with your friends and everybody's like actually talking to each other. It was similar to like playing GoldenEye,
Yeah.
Which I tried to play GoldenEye again recently. That game is like, it's like impossible. Everybody's crowded on the same screen. It's a total mess. But yeah, it's like the social experience of actually physically playing in a room together.
Yes.
Yeah. Super fun.
Well, it's like, they all had, I mean, when I was, because I've got a good 10 years on both of you, so I go back slightly earlier, and you've got the Sega where you had the multi-tap, because it only had 2 plug sockets, so you bought the multi-tap, which would enable you to put 4 controllers into it. And then you could play things like Gauntlet.
Yes, and the NES also had I think it was called the Satellite.
Yes.
And, that's right.
Player Gauntlet on NES also, yeah.
So,
oh, man.
Yeah, and then it all went online. I can't do any of that malarkey. I just don't. I always, whenever I tried online stuff, someone who was in Singapore just came on and kills me within 5 seconds. There's just no point. It's a 14-year-old.
Yeah, even with my group of friends, I remember GoldenEye. One of us was just way better than it was not me. There was one of our friends who was just like, he'd have like 60 kills and everyone else has like 2. So it's still kind of fun.
I guess we better put it back slightly to Marvel Masterpieces because I guess my first question is obviously, and I think you may have mentioned this when someone asked you in a comment. Obviously, you can't display the pieces because of everything going on, and you have started to part with some of them. But is there any plans afoot for a book to come out of all the pieces, or would you like there to be?
I would very much like for there to be. I don't think there's much more that I can say about it.
Understood.
Yeah. But I actually, so I had been out of collecting cards since, those sets from the 90s. And I did not know when I was brought back in on this what an investment it is to get into it. And so there's all kinds of reasons that I want a book to be out there. I'd like for people to see the art larger. It's nice to have it all collected in one volume. I'm really proud of it as a body of work. But also just there's a lot of people I know who are not necessarily card collectors who are interested, and I know the price point is going to put people off if they're not already invested in the hobby. Mm-hmm. And so that's another thing that I think that having a book would be a really cool thing, because it would be something that would also make it much more accessible to a much broader audience. So that's definitely something that I would like to see happen.
Okay, well, take my money now on that one. If and when it happens. What else was I going to ask? I was going to ask something else. You know what? It's gone. It's gone because I think I've asked most of the questions that I had here, and we've talked about all sorts of stuff. So I'm going to talk about Black Cat.
Okay.
Let's have a look at Black Cat
I really admire your restraint.
You're amazed. I've made it this far.
I've made it
this far. I've made it this far. Listen, I'm just chuffed to bits that it was one of the pieces that was allowed out this early on, and she was allowed to come out and play. One of the first things I did was turn it upside down. I won't lie to you. I locked my phone and turned it upside down. Then I got it on my laptop and turned that upside down. Loads of dust fell out the keyboard. It's a stunning piece. And I tell you what I love about it, especially so on the scan of the original painting that you've put up, is how the red cuts through on it and really kind of brings it to life, but gives it so much depth as well because of the way that the beams are in front and behind, and that kind of perception thing going on. Just tell us about the idea and the concept. And
so I want to say at the outset that when I first became aware of your podcast and I became aware of your connection with Black Cat, I had already painted this piece. Like, this one was very much already in the done folder.
Wow.
And so I was just, whenever the subject of Black Cat would come up and you would talk about what you like to see in a Black Cat and everything, I would just be kind of like thinking like, I hope that mine like doesn't miss the mark. But it wasn't like it could influence what I was doing because it was already finished,
Exactly right.
I wanted to have her like with a lot of the characters. I really tried to make sure that I didn't lean too much on just like heroic portraits.
Yeah,
which are really fun to do, but I feel like if the whole set is just a bunch of people standing there looking impressive but not actually doing anything, that gets a little bit boring. Like, I wanted to have some pieces more kind of like portraitish and some pieces more active, and so it seemed to me like having her in the middle of a heist, pulling off some kind of heist, would be a fun thing to do, because honestly don't think that I've seen that many images along those lines, which oftentimes if I was like debating different ways to approach a character, if I had a mental image of something and it felt like it was not typically the approach that other artists have taken, that it felt like that was a worthwhile thing to do.
The road less traveled.
Yeah, I really believe that if you can do something unexpected, it gives you opportunity to make a piece that's really memorable, you know. And but at the same time, obviously, like, this ridiculous laser grid is a total like homage to the 90s in and of itself. Just
Mission Impossible is what it reminds me of.
Yeah. Mission Impossible is the one everyone thinks of. And
are you going to say Catherine Zeta-Jones in?
I'm going to go back further. There was a movie called The Real McCoy. Now, I think the lasers were green and not red in that one. I have not seen this movie since whenever it came out, which was probably like 1993 or something. Yeah. But I remember it was a movie about, I'm gonna wing this. I'm probably gonna get it wrong, but I think it was a woman who's like needs to rob a bank in order to maintain custody of her child or something.
Of course,
I don't really remember. Yeah, it's
standard plot.
Yes, very relatable, and but yeah, it was there was definitely that like need to bypass the laser grid kind of thing in it, and it's just whenever I think of like that kind of like breaking in.
Oh, it was Kim Basinger.
Yes,
that's right, and and Val Kilmer, 93.
Okay, yeah, and
Wow.
and so that's what I just think of that as being like the most showy way that a person can do a burglary. Like when it comes to my actual favorite movies of something like that, I like ones that take a more realistic approach. But
Yes.
if you're going to do it in a painting, it's got to be a little more visual. So
Yeah. Well, I love what you do with the lasers. I love the ones that are either not initiated or we're looking at them from an odd angle on the windowsill that are kind of just the red dot, which I would think
yeah,
really adds to that. I love
I was
that.
thinking of that as like, because sometimes
Yeah.
in those movies, there's like a pattern and they like, I got to
Yes.
study the pattern. I know the timing of it. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I love that. That's what I thought too. That comes off really clear. And I mean, obviously I don't know specifically, the shapes that it creates and how well it does to help the image feel three-dimensional. But having the lasers in that particular pattern and getting that angle from the bottom
yeah.
floor. You did a similar thing in Moon Knight, where you have that great, like, where he has his hand on the bad guy and he's flying through the air, right?
Yeah.
Like you do, and this repeats a little bit of a pattern in the pieces we've seen so far, is that the angles you're taking for this composition to have these characters kind of on the canvas, on the page, really helps to give it space. I really love that decision. That was really, really fun.
Yeah, and so we talked a little bit earlier about photography and my camera collection, and I really do think photographically in composing, and that's something that I think is just like shooting photography as its own art form has taught me a lot about just the way that we understand images, and I think that it's different now than it would have been, 50 years ago, which that was different than it would have been 50 years prior to that. It's at this point we're so keyed to understand photographic imagery that you can play with like the perspective and the angle of this piece all makes sense through a camera lens. It's a very kind of particular way of
it's very cinematic. Like it's very, very cinematic. Like if you look at the Hella or even the Taskmaster, as we've looked at him, right? Mm-hmm. I would say that a lot of your compositions are extremely cinematic and have that kind of sphere kind of perspective type of look to them. Like for instance, I really love what you did with the Iron Man quite a bit.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think my favorite part about that Iron Man is that you get to see the stratosphere and you have this really good, like, you know what I mean? Like you get to see like your eye drifts very well there. You know what I mean? And I feel like it's really interesting how that pans out.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I mean, definitely like, I'm a big, obviously we've been talking about movies, big movie fan. And so that's a big part of my visual vocabulary, and there's a lot of kind of like when I'm doing those pencils that I was showing earlier, that's kind of like nailing down the concept and the idea, and then it's about like figuring out where is my camera in relation to the scene and what kind of a lens do I want to put on my camera, and that dictates then like how it's all going to work and what the relationship of the character and the environment is going to be and that kind of thing.
I love these.
They're wonderful.
The ones I'm looking at here, so many of them, and I don't think I got this with the earlier set. So many of them could be instantly a cover on a comic. The Black Panther screams at me that it could quite happily be a first issue or an annual or something like that. The Moon Knight definitely does. The Black Cat definitely does. The Cable is one of those. I just obviously that's one of the more kind of sort of heroic posing. Mm-hmm. But then you look at him and you realise actually he's a bit ticked off. He's about to do something a bit naughty. Not sure what. And he reminds me of Brad Pitt a little bit. His face reminds me of Brad Pitt.
It's funny that multiple people have asked me if that's Boris's face, and it is not. And I just think I can see where they're seeing that, but Yeah, it's. I can see some Brad Pitt in there too. It's funny. I have a little Brad Pitt head here that was not used for the cable, but I have these little these little 1/6 scale heads that sometimes are helpful for kind of like, just having a quick reference on hand.
That's hilarious. I love it. I love how everyone's got their little thing.
Brad Pitt's head there might show up a little bit, maybe on a sketch card or something.
Oh, okay. Interestingly, so obviously you'll probably have people, if you haven't already, asking you about sketch cards, because they're a rabid bunch, the sketch card collectors. Have you worked in that size format before?
No, I mean, aside from doing doing my prelims, which are, I guess, about twice as big as a sketch card. Mm-hmm. What is it? A sketch card is 2.5 by 3.5. Is that right?
That's right.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, if I'm usually working at 4x6, it's still in the realm of small, but not quite that small. But no, that was quite a different experience. And to see some of the work, Noran had been kind of introducing me to the just the range of work that's out there, and it is pretty unbelievable.
It's really impressive. Yeah. When Dave and I were talking, he was asking about that, and we just happened to be talking about it, and I showed him like Nar or Basso or like Tony Perna, with that detail, you know what I mean? And they're all beautiful pieces, but it definitely is kind of having like a different skill set. You know what I mean? Almost, you kind of have to like retrain yourself in a way to start working on the sketch cards and stuff like that. And there's a range there. You don't have to do all that detail. People do portraits that are really clean and really beautiful. Like Bianchi does beautiful portraits. Like Jusco does portraits and torsos. And stuff like that. Yeah. So there's a huge range for sketch cards. Yeah.
I think that as I was doing the ones that I did, I definitely. So you probably saw that I was doing some paintings on the back of Magic cards on the proofs. Beautiful. Which a big part of doing those was I don't have a lot of room to screw up on the Marvel sketch cards. Like, I think I only got like 3 extras, which need to be returned with the rest of them anyway, so it's like I really don't want to jump in on these and not know if it's going to work or not. So that was why I was actually doing those artist proofs painted on backs of the Magic cards. Was I felt like I needed to get a few hours in of just kind of like experimenting and seeing what works, and I definitely agree that the more like head and shoulders approach makes it's a much easier thing to achieve than going for like a full body, and it's frustrating because sometimes like there's the idea that it's like, but I really want to do a full body, and then you're halfway through and you're like, I flew too close to the sun. So and also like same as when I was saying like not wanting the whole set to all just be the same kind of energy. You want to have a variety. So with the sketch cards, I didn't want it to just be a bunch of portraits, but I did realize that the closer to just a face you're getting on there, the more you can work with. So crazy respect to the people who are doing those like insanely detailed, like 1/2 and 3/4 figure sketch cards.
Multiple characters, crazy stuff.
Yeah, I know. I would love to see some of those in person, because it's just like I feel like I don't understand how they're achieving.
You will now, sir. You're with us, don't you?
Yeah, you'll see some. We'll get some over to you.
The one artist in particular that springs to mind. There are some artists who we know have done trading card work and a lot of other incredible portrait work for Marvel and other publishers. And one of them is Ray Largo, who I know does magic cards as well. And when I was looking at his Instagram feed last year, he went on a burst of posting some marvelous pieces where he would literally sketch on coasters from bars. He would do pencil or pen sketches, and they're the most wonderfully, and they're really small format. And I've got a lot of respect for all of you artists, guys, because I can't draw. I can barely draw a stick person. But it's just not in my skill set. So whenever I see someone who can so effortlessly move between the size of pieces that he must be doing, which must be pretty similar to the size that you worked in, to then being able to scale down and still have that detail. And some people just make it look absolutely effortless, and they must have trained and worked and grafted at it for years. I'm not, I know Ray's older than us because he's worked on pieces from the 90s, but he, that's something you must have really kind of grown more easy with over the years.
I think that it's always impressive to see who can really do this meticulous render, and some of the artists that Norin mentioned talking about sketch cards, really it's mind-boggling, and it's really strong work in addition to being really meticulously crafted work. But for me, it's the strong work is the important part, and whether that is a piece that's extremely fine detailed or whether it's a piece that's very simplistic. I mean, just going back to the Daredevil we were talking about, it's not a detailed piece, but I think that they don't all have to be necessarily, and in some cases, the most effective solution might be something that's a little bit more simple. And I think that's something else that I find really impressive is just seeing how some artists are able to really boil things down. Some of the artists that I follow and whose work I'm really inspired by, it's really about what they're not saying, getting it across with saying just as much as is necessary.
Yeah. I mean, I'm the same way too, because I think a lot of times, and I agree 100%. For me, especially the pieces that I showed you and the pieces that Ian and I get into, if an artist captures that character or captures that moment or that story, it doesn't have to be, it could be just black lines on white. Because I've seen some pieces like David Mack, who does sketch cards, right? And, David Mack is, amazing. Sketch cards he does, black line, white, and they're just... it, right? You get the energy, you get the emotion, and the story's all there. Yeah. It's just, it definitely is. Absolutely. It's not so much about the detail or anything like that. It's about what the artist is actually putting into the piece, the decisions they're making, exactly like you're saying.
And I mean, and which is also not to discount the impact that the detail has. It's just, there's different things different artists are going for. So I appreciate both. And I started when I just was learning how to paint, starting my career, I was very much a detail focused artist, and my personal aesthetic has shifted over time. And at this point I feel like I can kind of appreciate a lot. The stuff that I find interesting is much broader than it was when I started out.
Yeah, that's interesting. Just because you touched on it, who are the artists that you're looking at now who you're admiring or who've inspired you as you've progressed?
I think Sam Weber and Jeremy Geddes are two artists who I think in general their work going back for some years have been really influential to me. And they both have, I think, a very minimalist and clean approach. Now, Jeremy Geddes is I think exclusively fine art these days. And Sam is still doing a lot of cover illustration. And I know he does a lot of like personal experimental work, which is cool to see. Look up his Dune paintings. Sam Weber.
That's it. I was like,
I knew I'd heard the name.
Me too. I was like, that sounded so familiar, and I was trying to picture it. Okay, yeah, that's crazy.
And he's also just a really, I've gotten to hang out with him several times, and he's one of those artists that is also just extremely thoughtful. You can have conversations that are like, you know, really like going to inform my own perspective on my own work going forward. And some others, Rob Ray, who I think is doing magic now. I love how Rob handles his paint. Bud Cook and Jeremy Wilson are both doing some really cool kind of like interesting abstraction with their mark making and really interesting color choices. These are some off the top of my head. There's a lot of folks. And I get nervous when I start like
that's fine.
Like this. I'm
please,
also trying to keep it to like people who are working right now, because of course like I've got my the old classics that I go back to again and again.
Yeah,
the list can go on forever.
It can go on forever. I'm just looking at Sam's Dune work here, and it's astonishing. This is what I like. This is why I like asking that question when we get to ask it, because I always discover new people. Like when we interviewed Eric Gist. Which
and I love what Eric does too. And he's And that Moon Knight, I was just like, damn it.
Yeah.
Honestly, I look at some of the stuff he's done. I look at some of the pieces I've seen of yours from Masterpieces, and there are obviously differences in the style and the way that they're done, but they almost look like they could be that character in the next scene in some ways. There's that complementary kind of way that you've captured some of the characters that you both did, because obviously Flair, as Eric said, he got to choose a lot of the characters and he got a lot of the big plum ones. But the beautiful thing about Flair is that even more so than the Masterpieces, as we talked about, Flair has some really obscure characters in it.
Really does.
How many pieces are in that?
The base is 90, and then there are 6 tiers of 10, going up to 150. It's pretty big, but it's when you add in the achievements. So in terms of original art, there's 155 originals. In the set, but of course, it's
how many artists? Is it like 6 or 7 artists?
No, there's more. There's probably about I want to say 15. Might be more, but yeah, there's a number.
Are there character duplicates in that one?
No.
Okay.
Not really. Yeah.
No.
So that's what I feel like. Once you run through, like, there's probably about like 40 or 50 characters that feel like the usual suspects.
Sure.
And then you start getting into some kind of like lesser traveled territory.
Yeah.
And coming up with some names that you might need to refresh your memory a little bit. I know Norin talked about collecting Spot. I was like, I don't think I know who that is. I gotta go look this up.
Such a fun character.
Such a fun, weird character. Yeah, it's actually funny. One of my good friends collects him too, and it's just the weirdest, because I don't think any 2 people have ever like collected Spot. So we're laughing because we're like, oh man, I do it too, and I like saw his collection. But I don't know, there's something. It's really weird. But again, like trading cards have that power to them. You know what I mean? Because it really is like getting. Well, you know, the cool thing about Masterpieces too is that it's also like an artist spotlight, right? Which is the thing I've always loved about that set. You know, not only do you have multiple characters, but then you can see what an artist has done for each of that character. It's just really cool.
Something about the art that's made for a card. I know that there are some card sets that have repurposed art, but the art that's made specifically for a card as its end intention is allowed to kind of do things you might not be able to do in other ways, you know? And so even making a piece for a cover there are considerations with the whatever kind of like logo needs to be made room for. I think there was like a little bit of consideration of that with these because of the what ifs, but it wasn't the same. And also there is that fight for being the piece that's going to stand out against all the other pieces when it's on the shelf, which means that you sometimes don't get to do a little bit more of like a quiet moment or a little bit more of it. I think, like you mentioned that a lot of these look like they could be covers, which probably a lot of that just comes from, I have that as a big part of my background of a lot of the work that I do. But some of them I feel were things that just wouldn't have necessarily been appropriate to use in that way, but would still make for a really cool just standalone image. And there was something about like that piece of the story that was like, just as a pinup, basically. Yeah. And I don't often get to do something where it's like, this is it. It's just this. It's not trying to like, sell a book or something. It's just a really cool picture of this character.
I like the way you,
It looks like you had the most incredible fun doing it. It really does.
It was a blast. Yeah, I gotta say, I never worked with Upper Deck. Well, no, it's not true. I worked with Upper Deck many years ago, but not with any of the people that I worked with on this set and not on this property. Same, I did like 2 pieces for Marvel like 10 years ago, but this was a completely different thing. And so I was like super excited to get started on it. And I also had this like kind of dread that I was like, if I'm a year into this and it sucks, it's going to be like really terrible because there's no escape. The only way out is to just see it through, And so I also just felt like so relieved when I started doing them that was not the case. You never know. Like there have been times where I had wanted to work for a client for years and years, and I finally got the opportunity, and then it was just like a personality clash. Like, I hate this person, or they're like really nitpicky about details that I think are not important, and so it's really hard to, when I started sending pieces in and getting feedback, and everything was just flowing really smoothly. It was just like a huge relief. It's like, okay, I think this is going to be all right. Like, this is going to,
Good. Well, everyone's so excited because people would have heard the Jennifer Wu interview by now. And she was just over the moon and such a sweet person, and talking about the different artists and talking about how much she had fun with you and working on your pieces. We didn't pressure her too much because we know we can't say anything right now. So we tried to stay off the topic.
She was very good.
She was very good.
We tried a few sneaky moves on her, and she just brushed us off.
She's an expert.
She's an expert, but
she is actually. Yeah,
it does sound like everyone at Upper Deck, and obviously the work you can just see, like Ian said, it looked like it was an absolute blast. And honestly, we just have so much appreciation for you being a fan, taking the time. Really giving these cards the longevity that we can already see they have, and we've only seen 10-12% of the final product.
There are some that I'm really excited for people to see. There are a couple that I intend to keep because I just don't want to let them go. And those tend to also be the ones that I'm like, really interested to see what people's reactions are.
Well, there's a
couple that I'm like, I'm curious to see like what the response is. But yeah, it was so much fun. And I don't know like exactly how things went that I was the person that they came to for this, but I'm so glad that it did come together that way. And yes, Sam Padilla, who was the art director, is just like, I couldn't have asked for a better person to work with. Really, like, from start to finish, and even now, like, there's still a couple loose ends we're tying up, and it's just like what again could have been a good situation turned bad with the wrong people. It was just like a best case scenario all the way through. So
wow.
Good. Well, listen, thank you for doing it. You know, I think I speak for every single bit of feedback I've seen on it, and you know, I mean, some people choose not to read the comments, and you know, especially actors. If you've been in a film, you know, one thing you don't do is go and read the comments, and you may well steer clear of that. But I can assure you that the feedback everyone is really, really excited.
I've seen mostly very enthusiastic feedback, which is great. I've seen some people that it's not their taste, and that's great too. Like,
we've dealt with them.
No, I mean, I think that there's a difference between having an opinion and being an asshole, and
we've had one of those as well. Yeah.
I haven't seen that then, but I know also that, like, I actually have written articles. I write sometimes for a blog called Muddy Colors that's like a educational blog for illustration, and I've written articles about just the whole, like, there is no art is for everyone. There's different audiences. I recognize there are things that I like, and that doesn't make it better than another thing that somebody else likes that I don't care for, and so so that's all well and good. But that said, I'm having a weird issue with Facebook where it'll only show me the top like 3 posts in groups right now. So that's it's almost kind of like Facebook is preventing me from reading the comments. It's like,
okay,
no, you're in a timeout right now. Just
that is weird. That is weird.
Your mind on your business and
focus on your artwork, Dave. Don't be going on.
Yeah. I'm not worrying too much about it, because I also think the less time I spend on there, probably the better. So
I think that's generally a healthy thing. It's easier said than done when you run not one but 2 groups. But that's what I signed up for, and I love it. Thank you, Dave. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us this afternoon.
If you want to do this again when you've seen the rest of them, hit me up.
Oh yes, we will definitely do. And,
so excited.
And just as a last request, people have heard me, and in fact, there's 2 more things I want to say. People have heard me mention this, and they're probably sick of it by now, even though some of the episodes that we've mentioned it on haven't come out yet. But I am determined to do a little content series on Instagram and or Facebook called Marvel Meowsterpieces, which features cats of artists. And I know that you've already put forward your fine furry friend for this. Mike Munshaw, one of the artists that we know, has actually started an Instagram feed for his cat called Olive Jane, the cat artist, I believe. So I do believe there's a future in this, and I'm going to have a chat with Upper Deck and see if they can release.
I do believe
series.
There is a future for this. I love it.
But if listen, I can't get an entire Black Cat series out, so I'm going to focus just on cats in general. So
I think it's a good compromise, man.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm 100% serious that there is definitely an audience. So
Thank you, Dave. Thank you. The check's in the post.
Perfect.
And the last thing, just because it occurred to me when we were talking about your cameras, it reminds me very much about how Tom Hanks talks about his typewriter collection. Because he collects all sorts of typewriters, classic ones, mobile ones that you carry around, the big ones, and he's just, when you hear him start talking about them, it really reminded me of the way that you've started talking about your cameras. I don't know if you've ever heard him be interviewed on it, but
I'm aware that that's something that he's into. I don't know if I've heard him talk at length about it, but I fully understand, and I assume he probably writes.
Yes.
And I think that that's part of the thing, because there's actually a typewriter store in like 7 blocks from my house. That,
oh, wow.
It's like I think that it's been around for decades, and most of their business, like any of these places, I'd imagine is online, but they have a brick and mortar. And I don't own a typewriter because I would never use it, but I really understand it. Like I feel like if I ever got into doing writing as a thing that was like something I was doing often, I probably would be tempted to stop by the typewriter store and pick something up, because there is something about like physical mechanical objects. Yeah, the cameras that I'm most excited about these days are the ones that don't even have a battery in them. So, you know, anything that has just like fully clockwork and gears and springs.
Yeah, and the sound.
The sound is, the physical experience of interacting with a mechanical object that's really well designed and well built and still functioning well is just incredibly satisfying. So
yeah.
I'm going to cut myself off before going down that rabbit hole. But
no, that's quite well. Incredibly satisfying. Very much sums up the last 2 hours. So, Dave,
for sure.
I appreciate
Thank
it.
you. I really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much.
Dave, you know, there's only two more words left to say on this podcast. You know how we end our show. So
I think I'm going to nail it.
I think you're going to nail it. Oh, I spoke over it. Say it again.
You spoke over it. Say it again.
Enjoy collecting.
Yes. Boom.
Awesome.
Lovely stuff. Thank you. Thanks for listening to the Marvel Card Collectors podcast. Visuals and tasting notes for each episode can be found on our Facebook page. You can subscribe and leave us a voicemail via our home on anchor.fm/MCCP. We're also on iTunes, Spotify, and all major podcast platforms. Please take a second to subscribe, like, and review our show wherever you get your podcasts. Our podcast can be found by Googling @the MCC Pod, which will also find us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. Our Facebook community is at MCCW, Marvel Card Collectors Worldwide, and MMC, Marvel Masterpieces Collectors. The great music we use is called Rocket Power by Kevin MacLeod. Thanks to the collectors, artists, and creators who support the Marvel Cards Fan Collective. We'll see you next time, and remember, it's a small hobby but a fun one. Make mine Marvel and enjoy collecting.